So before I get started, I do have a second channel. It's going to be stuff unrelated to anime and mangas. Basically, I'm looking at doing like kind of like analysis style videos for video games, music, maybe even TV shows, etc, etc. So I'm planning to launch that next week. So if you are interested in more content from myself or any of those ideas, please go and subscribe. Most likely, I'm going to be uploading Tuesday and Thursday, and maybe one time on the weekend on that second channel. And then the main channel here, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, all anime. Second channel, not anime and manga. So if you're interested, go and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Link will be in the description below as well as in the comment section. So thank you. Tokyo Ghoul, but with vampires. Count me in, baby. So there is a series known as Happiness, which is done by one of my favorite authors, Oshimi Shuzo, who done one of my favorite series, Flowers of Evil, also known as Aka no Hana. The funny thing about Oshimi Shuzo is that I put his work right next to Ino Asano, as well as Naoki Urasawa. Now, I know Naoki Urasawa is kind of the odd pick out of those three, but those three authors are my top pick for my favorite authors of all time, right? If you've ever read an Ino Asano work like Oyasumi Pun Pun, if you've read anything from Naoki Urasawa like Monster or 20th Century Boys or Flowers of Evil from Oshimi Shuzo, but you would know that they are very, very prolific in storytelling and being able to capture so much emotion in their artwork. The funniest thing when it comes to Oshimi Shuzo is the fact that his artwork is very choicy. It's very minimalistic at times, but incredible details in others. So he balances his artwork when the time is right. There's no real flat line for his artwork. His artwork never really looks the same between series. Like, obviously they have the same resemblance, but there is a lot of emphasis on atmosphere in his artwork. And you can clearly tell his series apart and what his artwork is trying to portray in said atmosphere when it comes to his artwork. Happiness is one of his newest series. It has about 40 chapters. And it is something so profoundly interesting to me as a Tokyo Ghoul fan, right? Because not a lot of people know about Oshimi Shuzo. He's I guess a new generation author who is extremely prolific in storytelling and artwork and portraying a lot more realistic and gruesome tales of stories. Very similar to Ino Asano and Naoki Urasawa. Like, they're not obviously in the weekly spotlight of series, not in Weekly Shonen Jump or even Weekly Young Jump. These three authors kind of do their own thing and they're very successful. And they do it extremely well. When I first came into Happiness, I kind of brushed it off a little bit too early because I read about 5 to 10 chapters at the time of it being released, and I kind of took it as just like a Tokyo Ghoul variant. And I completely retract that statement because it couldn't be something so entirely different. The first 10 chapters definitely comes off very Tokyo Ghoul-esque, that's for sure. You have a main character who is very small in his own world. He's very shy and has a lot of anxiety and doesn't really talk to people all too well, or doesn't have many friends, and he's kind of stuck in his own bubble. Sounds pretty familiar, right? Ultimately, he has an encounter with a woman known as Nora, who is a vampire, and she attacks him on the street very ruthlessly, and his life is ultimately turned into something completely different. Also sounds familiar. Up until that point, that is the only thing that is very similar to Tokyo Ghoul, is kind of its structuring style for its opening segment and how we got to the main character becoming a vampire. What's profoundly interesting, however, is how Oshimi Shuzo handles the vampire formula, because it's completely oversaturated, right? There are so many different depictions of vampire story in every single media that you could probably think of. He doesn't really do it completely differently. If anything, it's quite the same storytelling as anything else, but what he does do is push and emphasize the extreme trauma it has on one's mentality and one's mental psyche. How going from a human to a vampire, having to feed on blood to survive, and adapting to these new form abilities, and basically changing and reforming yourself as a person is very detailed, and it shares a lot of similarities with Tokyo Ghoul, as Kaneki would go through the process of becoming a ghoul. And I've always said that Tokyo Ghoul as a story has taken a lot of assets and based very heavily around the vampire genre, if you will. Not only does the author depict the struggle and, I guess, quote-unquote tragedy of becoming a vampire at such a young age, but he also depicts the narrative in multiple spotlights. So it's not actually from the main character's perspective fully, if that makes sense. There is portions of the series, which obviously has 40 odd chapters, that don't even involve the main character at all and kind of focus on an outsider's perspective. So to kind of give you the full concept of what it's like to become a vampire, you get all the different variations of visions and interpretations of said vampire. You get the main character's perspective, which is a human turning into a vampire and going through the process of what he is and what he has to do to live and survive in the struggle of being a vampire. But then you also get a small perspective of vampires looking at him like he's some new innocent vampire that doesn't really know what he's doing and can be bullied by another vampire, a more experienced one. But then you also have another perception of another character being turned into a vampire that did not handle it the same way as the main character did and completely went off the rails and couldn't control himself, but tried so heavily to confide in the main character, even though the main character himself didn't know what the fuck he was doing. On top of that, you also have another perspective of a human woman who is trying her hardest to understand the main character prior to him turning into a vampire and after. When she starts to find out certain pieces of information on what happened to him because he suddenly disappears, it becomes this massive experience from her perspective on learning about what he was, what he went through, and where he could have disappeared to, and her kind of struggle on looking for him, you know, trying to track him down and where he disappeared to. You get all these perspectives. It's so coherently entwined into the story that you never really feel out of place. You never really feel like you're jumping from too many different perspectives. It feels very grounded in reality, and what helps emphasize this very complex narrative with all these different characters is how the author portrays it using his artwork, because happiness at times is very simplistic, and honestly it's actually the beauty in the spaces that allows his artwork to shine, because some of the best artwork I've ever seen, don't get me wrong, there's incredible artists that do so much detail and depth that just brings their artwork alive, but how Oshimi Shuzo does it, at least in Happiness on a majority of occasion, is that a lot of his beauty lies in the negative spaces, his usage of white, and how he kind of wraps that into building an atmosphere around his main character. There is specific moments that kind of continue through the story where the main character loses sight of himself, like he starts getting, I guess, quote unquote groggy because he's been out into the sun for too long, or he hasn't drunk enough blood as a vampire, and he kind of uses the white as the kind of like this blurring point or this like groggy point around the main character's head. And when you visually see this, you feel like you fully come to understand what that character is most likely going through. I don't know how he does it, but something so simplistic, he maximizes it and uses it extremely well, because I know Oshimi Shuzo can draw, and he does show it in Happiness. There's been some gorgeous panels of when the main character thrives in the midnight, you know, seeing the full moon for the first time as a vampire and just how that impacts him, and you see the scenery and it's so profoundly drawn, so vividly and atmospherically drawn that you kind of feel it as a reader. And that artwork itself is pure talent. It's natural born talent, and the fact that he can kind of make something so simplistic, so complex and atmospheric in nature is incredible. And how he wraps that with the main character, with the scenery and the vampiric nature, which is very gruesome obviously, and how he portrays that to the audience, us as readers, is absolutely incredible. Like, even if you didn't know what the story was, you would still feel a sense of emotion kind of pouring over you, whether it be dread or the sense of urgency or relief or whatever. Like, you get all of these crazy emotions just from seeing this artwork, and it is extremely incredible. You put this artwork on a story that has a very concrete base, but then ultimately grows in complexity in terms of its character nature and how it goes about telling a vampiric story, you got yourself a incredible journey. And I would highly recommend, if you are a fan of Tokyo Ghoul, that you do give this series a chance. Yes, it has vampires, alright, but don't let that stop you. I understand vampires are completely oversaturated, but just give it a chance, you know, read a bunch of chapters for it, and you will 100% understand what I'm talking about when it comes to Happiness and how it goes about telling a story using such atmospheric artwork and complex nature and storytelling. Trust me, I love Oshimi Shuzo's work, and Flowers of Evil is incredible, and Happiness is becoming a series that is incredibly prolific as well and could be another classic for him. So that's basically it. Let me know what you guys would like to see a video on next. Kind of open to suggestions at this point, and basically talk about anything and everything. Could be full series, could be certain things in series, who knows? I guess you guys will let me know. But with that being said, I'm actually going to end the video off here. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe, I would greatly appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.